Yeah, geez, that's right. Glad you said something. Good morning, everyone. Is everyone ready to go? We'll call the meeting to order then. No one has to be excused. Our minutes from our last meeting were circulated. Lionel? Lionel moves as circulated. Any discussion? That is all in favor. Are there any post-agenda items? Seeing none, can we have an adoption of the agenda? Tracy moves. All in favor. That is passed. We have a number of items on the development report. Are there any questions? Yes, Trace.
I just had one. It's just a correction under the last permit. It should be Division 5 under John and Robin Nesbitt, Lake Knoll Resort.
Okay, thank you. We'll change that. There's also another correction on that. Sorry, I should have checked this.
Oh, I should have waited.
And the home occupation is a goat, cheese, and yogurt operation.
Use your mic.
Sorry, the home occupation was what?
It's a goat, milk, cheese, and yogurt operation.
Any further clarifications, questions? And we'll accept it as information. Subdivisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Going? You're going, Aaron? Good.
Yes.
Super.
The first subdivision we have today is file 2019-0-115. The purpose of this application is to create one new parcel, approximately 5.8 acres in size, containing an existing residence and improvements from a previously unsubdivided quarter section for residential use. The quarter section to be subdivided is legally known as the northwest quarter of section 36, 16, 13 west of the 4th meridian and is located in Division 2, approximately 3 miles south and 2 miles west of the hamlet of Tilley and adjacent to Highway 535. A surveyor's sketch has been submitted with the application, and it appears that the dwelling and all improvements are all contained within the proposed lot, and water is provided through the county's rural water line. Sewage is currently dealt with open discharge, though the applicants have indicated that they will install a septic tank and field to meet the private sewage disposal regulation setback distances. Access to the proposed parcel is from a developed county road to the west, and the proposed and residual parcel appear to have a developed approach. Information has been submitted from the AER indicating there are no wells located within the vicinity of lands, and there are no wetlands and no historical resources located. Municipal reserve is not applicable, as this parcel may be considered the first parcel out of the quarter section in accordance with section 663A of the MGA. The application has been circulated to referral agencies and adjacent landowners, and we have received the following comments back. Tellus has no objection. Fortis Alberta does not require an easement, and Alberta Transportation does not require a permit. Though it should be noted that Alberta Transportation has waived Section 15.2 of the Subdivision and Development Regulations requiring a service road adjacent to a highway due to the highway being a low-volume 2-lane highway. And although it has been waived, the applicant should be advised that no additional access to the highway will be granted and that existing direct accesses could remain on a temporary basis for limited agricultural use only. Given this information, it is recommended that the subdivision be approved subject to the following conditions: that pursuant to section 6541D of the MGA, all outstanding property taxes be paid to the County of Newell, that the applicant install a septic tank and field or other suitable private sewage disposal treatment system to replace the open discharge that cannot meet the 300-foot setback from the new property lines as per the Alberta private sewage systems, and that the applicant enter into an agreement with the County of Newell for the installation of any required road approaches to the proposed and/or remnant parcels. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of them now.
Okay, the floor is open. Seeing none, there's a motion is in order. Yubi, move as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor? That is passed. Our second one, Aaron?
Okay, thank you. The next subdivision we have is file 2019-0-126. The purpose of this application is to create a separate title for a portion of a quarter section approximately 28.8 acres in size, which is cut off from the parent title for the purposes of disposing of the land to the adjacent landfill site operated by Newell Regional Solid Waste Management Authority. The parcel subject to this application is legally described as the southwest quarter of section 35-1915, west of the 4th meridian, and is located in Division 5, approximately half a mile north of the intersection of Highway 1 and Highway 36. The subject land is vacant of buildings but contains an AltaLink transmission tower and the corresponding right-of-way easements affecting the eastern half of the proposed parcel. Legal access to the new lot and residual parcel can be achieved via Highway 36 or a dedicated access road south of the proposed parcel. It is noted that the previous road closure and consolidation has cut off access to Range Road 152. There are no abandoned wells and no wetlands located within this vicinity of these lands. And the Alberta Historic Resource Value information indicates that there is historic resources categorized as HRV 4 and 5, which have been identified within the subject parcel. We've received the following comments back from referral agencies. Tellus has no objection. Fortis Alberta does not require an easement. ATCO Gas has no objection, and ATCO Electric has no objection. The Historic Resource Administrator has indicated that the applicant must obtain Historic Resource Act approval prior to proceeding with any land surface disturbances. And Alberta Transportation has indicated that a 30-meter wide service road right-of-way be designated by caveat, which will be located perpendicular to and across the highway frontage of the parcel to be created. And in addition, there is an existing AltaLink transmission right-of-way, and they do indicate that the development of the service road, they need an encroachment approval if they do develop the service road. Given this information, it is recommended that the subdivision be approved, subject to the following conditions: a 10% reserve requirement pursuant to Section 666 and 667 of the MGA be provided as money in lieu of land on the 28.8 acres at the market value of $2,000 per acre, at a total of approximately $5,768 be paid to the County of Newell. And the following conditions: that pursuant to Section 6541D of the MGA, all outstanding property taxes be paid to the County of Newell. That pursuant to Section 6551B of the MGA, the applicant or owner or both enter into a development agreement with the County of Newell, which shall be registered concurrently with a final plan against the titles to be created. And the development agreement may include clauses related to the future construction of the service road at the developer's expense, and that the need to obtain AltaLink permission with encroachment approval of the right-of-way. And a 30-meter wide service road shall be dedicated by caveat located perpendicular and across the highway frontage to comply with Section 15.2 of the Subdivision and Development Regulation. The applicant should contact Alberta Transportation to finalize the condition, and that the applicant submit a copy of the Historic Resource Act approval prior to registration of the subdivision. And if you have any questions now.
Floor is open. Yes, Lionel.
So the landfill authority is also purchasing a quarter section west of this parcel on section 34. I was wondering why that wasn't included in this application at the same time.
Directly west of there?
Directly west, yes, that's correct.
I'm not sure, honestly. I haven't been informed about that.
Lionel, is that a portion that requires subdivision, or are they purchasing the like the entire quarter?
They already have half of the quarter, and they're purchasing the other half of the quarter.
So if that doesn't require subdivision, then I guess that's why that wouldn't be included here. So then they can purchase that as the piece as it is, and then this portion would require to be taken off of the remnant piece so that they could purchase that as well, is my guess.
Yeah, we haven't received a subdivision application for that yet.
And we might not if they keep the title separate. Yeah. Brian?
Well, my question was similar, but it was more along the lines of how does this subdivision fit into that overall plan of the of the landfill, and how it sees this parcel either becoming part of the authority of the landfill authority, or is it going to remain this and it's simply for access? Or, you know, I realize it's fragmented now with the lines on it, and there's really no construction that can happen on that other than public utility. So I was just curious whether you have an answer for that.
Go ahead, Lionel.
Yes, the reason we needed this piece is because we needed to widen our access, our existing access. We need to double our road. And so that's why we needed this piece to go along with it.
Okay, any further discussion? Yes, Anne-Marie?
I'll make a motion to approve.
As presented. Any further discussion? All in favor? That is passed. There's no post-agenda items, but I forgot to do some introductions at the beginning of the meeting. We have a new ORSC representative who's just working his way around the table. And as soon as we're finished that, we'll go through some introductions. I take it that's who it is.
Clarence, sorry, just as an addition, I forgot to introduce our new planner. This is Erin Graham. She's from ORSC, so she's going to work alongside another lady named Haley Windsor. They're going to help us out with the subdivisions and the day-to-day planning. So any questions you have, you can talk to Erin and Haley at ORSC. Did you want to introduce yourself, your background, Erin?
Yeah, as some of you know, I was raised in Rainier, just south of Brooks. I went to school at the University of Lethbridge and received my BA in Geography, and I've been with ORSC just over 2 years now.
So, when we were introduced to you before, Erin, were you still temporary at that point in time? I can't remember. It's been a while. Intern?
I'm trying to remember exactly. I was on a permanent contract then with ORSC, yeah.
Erin was helping Diane out in the background, so she has a lot of knowledge of what's been going on, I think, here. And now she's, alongside Haley. I think Haley will probably do more of the presentations, but the two of them together will be taking on the whole package now, so we're excited. And then Steve is here helping Erin today. He's also from ORSC.
Okay. Well, we'll just go quickly through our council here so everybody has an idea again where everyone's from.
Good morning, Lionel Juss. I'm Division 10, which is north and east of Brooks.
Anne-Marie Phillipson, Division 3, Patricia Millicent area.
Good morning, Hebe Kellum, Division 2, Tilley area.
Brian DeJong, around the village of Dutchess.
Aaron Samlung, Rolling Hills.
Molly Douglas, and I represent the area around Jam, Finnegan, Duck Lake.
Hi, Steve. I'm Kevin Stevenson, County Administrator. We've met.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Fife, and I represent Division 5, which is south and west around Brooks.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Hammergan. I'm from Division 4, which is Rainier, Scandia, and Bow City.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Chrisman. I'm from the west side of the county, around Bazzano.
Good morning. I'm hiding here, Erin. I'm Ellen Undra, and I represent the countryside around the village of Rosemary.
I'm Pam Elliott, and I'm Admin Assistant Planning and Development.
Hi there, Steve. We've worked together before. Lane Johnson, Director of Corporate Services.
I'm Sandra Stanway with the Brooks Bulletin.
And I think you know those people there, so welcome, and it's good to see some new faces, and I'm not sure how often you'll be here, Stephen, but
There we go. Thanks. Nice to be out this morning. Just a little bit more. Steve Hardy, I'm one of the senior planners at ORSC. I've been there over 21 years, over 25 years planning experience. So I'm often in the background or helping oversee stuff or come out to different communities, that sort of thing. I primarily work with Lethbridge County, County Warner, and a number of the other urbans, kind of in the Lethbridge, Southern Alberta area. But I've come out with Aaron today, so nice to be here.
okay. Nothing in camera. Question period. Are there any questions? If not, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
All right, I think we're all back together, so we'll call this meeting to order. No one is excused, and so that takes us to item 3.1, the minutes from September 19th. We have a motion for them. Anne-Marie moves the adoption. No further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Post-agenda items. No post-agenda items. Adoption of the agenda then. Motion to adopt. Tracy moves. All in favor? Question period, notice of motion. No one here, so we'll move on to, so we have public hearings at 11:30. We have a planning and development report, item 10.1, that we could do while Maria is here.
Okay, yeah, so, sorry, thank you. Our department is, continues to work on the intermunicipal development plans. We did an open house with Cypress County. We've done an open house with Rosemary. We are working on our first draft of the IDP with special areas, and I actually just got an email this morning with some edits, so hopefully that will go fairly quickly. And the IDP with Brooks is with the city right now. They are speaking to their councillors about it, and we're just waiting on their feedback. So once we've heard from the city, then we'll re-engage you, and hopefully we can move that one along as well. We've also been speaking to a few solar companies. One is the Tilley Solar project by the 876 and the number 1. So they have been talking to us regarding a development permit application, and they should be submitting that fairly soon. And we've also been speaking to a company about the Bazzano Solar project. So they are also, we've discussed the development permit application, and we're just waiting on a few more items before we can proceed with that application. Development permits have been kind of steady, I guess, the last few months, and in September, nothing out of the ordinary. The same with construction permits. And then I included a little after the development permit about the solar facility in Brooks. The company seems to be very happy with how things are going. They engaged a lot of local companies and Albertan companies, so there was a good boost to the economy, I would say, because of this construction. So that was my report for September. Any questions?
Tracy.
The solar company here, are they still going ahead with their expansion? Because they were looking at an expansion rate on this one. Is that right? Or do you know anything more about that?
The Brooks expansion, that is still just, we're waiting to hear from them. So there has been no news since I've been here. So, yeah.
I believe there's an there's a hearing happening, right? Yeah. Is that the AER? Is that who does those? AUC on the,
So yeah, they're waiting on that, and from a county standpoint, we're just waiting to hear from them and how they want to proceed based on what comes out of that hearing. Yeah, that's right, Molly.
and that's coming up next Friday, I think. Yeah, I think it's fairly soon. Yeah. Oh, okay. Anything else? Kelly, sorry.
Maria, I just wanted to share with you this elemental site. Everybody calls it the Brooks solar plant, and I told Elemental when we had a tour with them that we're proud in the county of Newell that it is in the county of Newell, in fact, even though it is titled Brooks Solar Plant. So, yeah, just know that any chance you get, I would love it if you shared that proudness as well. I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but I do want to make it clear. People in Medicine Hat, as close as Medicine Hat, they think that it's in the city of Brooks. So.
No, that sounds good. The County of Newell Solar Project, look close to Brooks. I like that. That's good.
However, as Kelly said, they do call it the Brooks Solar Project. So. Anything else? All right. Do we need to adopt motion to accept the planning and development report? Ellen moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So we'll go to the item 10.2. Excuse me.
Okay, this is an approval to proceed for a road closure and lease. It is, sorry, the division escapes me, but just north of the Bow River. So the landowner actually came into the county and said that they are utilizing that road allowance, so they'd like to close and lease it just because that's what they need to do because they're irrigating on it. The road closure will not affect legal access for adjacent lands, except for the EID owns the northwest quarter 1413 west of the 4th. So they do have access to that quarter via other lands, but we can account for that access in the lease agreement. Municipal Services had no issues with the closure and lease application, and we are recommending approval to proceed with the application to, we are recommending that you recommend the road closure and lease to the landowner.
Questions?
Which one are we doing? Are we doing the Good Friend one, or are we doing the other one?
10.2, right?
Yeah, this is Giesbrecht.
10.2. Wayne.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Wayne. Any other questions or comments, Clarence, or you?
You mentioned that they're leasing it.
they would like to close the road and lease it. So this is just the initial stage of the road closure. They'd like for your direction to see if this is good with the county, if they can go ahead with the formal road closure process. So they haven't submitted an application yet. Before we ask them to apply and submit the closure fee, we just want to make sure that this is something that's okay with council prior to closing the road and leasing it to them to facilitate their existing irrigation operation.
So no concerns? Seeing none? So the approval to proceed basically needs to be moved. Oh, Wayne did. Jeez. Thank you, Wayne. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, item 10.3.
Okay, so this is the intermunicipal development plan that we have drafted with the Village of Rosemary. We've been working with Dylan Consulting, who have also been working with Rosemary to do their municipal development plan. They don't have any of these documents in place yet, so because of the new requirements, they're working to get everything up to snuff now as well. So we had an open house on September 19th. There was quite a few people from both the city and the county. It was held in conjunction with the Rosemary MDP open house as well. And at that open house, we had people vote on a 1 mile IDP boundary or a half a mile, and a majority of the people wanted the half mile. So we are presenting here the half mile IDP boundary. So what that means is that any development, discretionary development permits that happen in this area, any municipal development plans, area structure plans, anything major, I guess, that happens in this area, then the county will have to refer that to Rosemary for comment. Also, developments accessing onto a road within the jurisdiction of the adjacent lands will have to be referred to the adjacent municipality. So while the county has to refer everything in that area, the village has to refer everything adjacent to that IDP boundary. So some of the items that are in the IDP, one of them that we talked about quite a bit was confined feeding operations. And generally, neither municipality is in favor of a confined feeding operation within this area, but we have added that in the spirit of promoting agriculture, if an applicant can show us that there's improved technologies, that they will reduce the impact to the surrounding lands, then we could consider that sort of development in this area, potentially, between both municipalities. So that's one thing. We've also said that any new developments located on Highway 550 and Railway Avenue, which are the major entrance points into Rosemary, that they'll be designed to create a positive impression of Rosemary. And then from a referral standpoint, referrals will start via administration, so it will go administration to administration. If there's a problem, then we will go to an IDP committee meeting. The IDP committee, in this document it says 3 members, but we have changed that. So in the new draft, we suggested that that be 2 members of each council, so 2 members from Rosemary, 2 members from the county, be on that IDP meeting if we ever get to that point. And then quorum would be at 1 councillor per municipality. And then if there's still a conflict between the IDP committee, then we go to a joint council meeting. So hopefully that never happens, but in the event that it does, and then you can go to the MGA and whatnot. But we've been working really well with the Village of Rosemary. Things have been going really smoothly, and we see this as being a good document for both the county and the village. Are there any questions?
Anne-Marie, Brian, on page 27, you talk about the quorum, and you just explained it, that it used to be in this document that we have, it says 3 councillors of each, and then the quorum would be 1 of each, which, you know, I flagged that one, because if you have 6, then 2 is not the quorum, it should be 4. So now, if it's changed to 2 of each, I'm just wondering if you should leave that at 2, and if those 2, 4, if they can't come to an agreement, if we should go straight to council. You know, it might never happen, but I'm a little bit wary of getting 1 councillor of each municipality to make decisions on a conflict. So I'm suggesting have 2 of each, and if they can't work it out, then you go to full council. Comments on that? Wayne?
Yeah, I have a problem with even 2 councillors or even 3 sitting on a board making a decision. Now, this would still have to come back to both councils to be decided on. They can make a decision on which direction they're going, but it'd have to be voted on by the council. They can't make a decision that we would have to stick to. And I'm just trying to get things straight here. I can see them making and then they still have to bring it to council for us to vote on.
I believe so.
Yes. Okay.
Clarence?
So if that is the case, what's the difference if it's 2 or 4?
Right, if that's a question, then you might as well skip the 2.
I was just talking about your intervention. You know, if you can't get 4 people together, I mean, shouldn't be too hard. But if it happens to be only 2 people together, and if they make a decision, it comes back to council, you still have the final say on it, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't really matter. I'm just looking at the steps, because if there is a conflict, it goes to the CAOs first. I mean, if it's, or if there's an application, CAOs look at it first. I'm assuming it's straightforward. They make a decision, you know, this is what we recommend to council. If they can't agree, then it goes to a committee of, now it's 4, 2 of each. And so why do that next step again to go, if you can't get a quorum, you got to go through that process to get 1 of each, and then it comes to council again. It certainly seems as though it's a little bit maybe complicated, because these are just local councillors, yeah. Would this be a committee that's permanently sort of struck? Or not permanently, but organizational meeting by organizational meeting sort of thing, Maria? Is that they would be on standby for this? Because that's what we've had in the past, I think, is a committee, standing committee, basically ready to go.
Yeah, that's right. Just a standing committee. It wouldn't be a regular meeting every month. It would just only when there can't be a resolution between the administration and we need some more input, then we would call an IDP meeting. And at that meeting, it's still a recommendation to council. So council still makes the final approval for that decision.
Right. Kelly? Oh, Brian actually was. It's okay.
So for that reason, I would like to see Anne Marie's suggestion put in for consistency. We have 2 with the IDP in Bassano, so why not be consistent throughout, at least in as many places as we can be? Just my thinking. And then going to another thought, you commented about the perimeter of Rosemary being aesthetically pleasing, or it's kind of a discretionary comment. Would we not say for both municipalities rather than just one? I think the document should reflect both municipalities in that comment.
Fair enough. Brian? Oh, Brian and then Wayne.
My question is in regards to the cost. You had $11,000 on. How is that shared between the 2 municipalities?
Oh, it was in that grant.
Yeah, we're paying for it. We have the grant.
Wayne?
My question is the intensive feeding operation. I believe ERCB does not allow those operations within 3 miles of a community anymore. I think that you can't even start one within 3 miles. I think that's covered under that.
Maria might know more. I don't know the distance.
I don't know the exact distance, but that does sound like something that could be. And the NRCB has jurisdiction over all intensive livestock operations. So they ask for our input and what our planning practices are with our municipal development plan and the intermunicipal development plan. So I don't think that it will affect new CFOs. I don't think that they could be located in this area because of the setback, but existing ones to expand, that could be something that we're looking at potentially down the road if someone wants to expand. Yeah.
Tracy?
I have more kind of in the document for wordage under item 6, implementation. 6.111 and 6.115, I believe, say the exact same thing. The receiving municipality may ask for an extension of the referral timeframes for specific applications, and in the spirit of collaboration, the sending municipality will endeavor to comply with this request. And it's at 6.111 and then 6.115. They're the same. And then my other question was 6.17. In it, I gotta find it here. It says each municipality shall have up to 20 working days from receipt of a referral for a statutory plan, concept plan, or land use bylaw amendment to review and provide comment. Then if you go down to 6.19, it talks about a land use bylaw amendment with the exact same thing. So again, I think it's, in my opinion, is a duplication. So just for you, something to look at. And then also under 6.31, it's under the dispute resolution policies, point 4, it has county of councillor and city of councillors, city councillors. So that probably should just be changed to village councillors in this case, but. Okay.
Good eye, Tracy.
We'll give Tracy a full-time job here pretty quick.
Proofreader.
Just so that I get in my mind, I thought Just help me understand what Anne Marie was talking about, what Kelly was talking about. I'm not sure they're talking about the same thing. You were talking 4 members, 2 from each, quorum 1, 1, and 1. That's correct?
Well, yes, in this document it does say 3.
I know, but
Because we took that right from the city and that just didn't get changed. So
Right.
we have recommended that we change that to 2. 2 from the county, 2 from the city, quorum being at 1, from the village, quorum being at 1 from the village and 1 from the county.
Right. Okay, right? Okay, and you were talking something a little different. Okay. So, and I have no problem with that.
Okay, so what Anne-Marie suggested, are we supporting or are we just leaving this alone? I'm confused now.
It's okay, as long as it's consistent with the other ones. If it comes back to council anyway, I'm fine with it. I just wrote it down because in this, what we got, it said 3. And to me, it doesn't make any sense to go down to from 6 to 4 and call it a quorum. From 6 to 2 and call it a quorum. But the way it's explained, and if it comes back to council, and if it's consistent with the others, I'm good with the way it is.
Okay. So there have been some changes now, just to, Brian, did I get to you yet, ever? Yes. There's some options there. And I don't know if we want to go with option 1 or 2 today. I mean, do you want to see these things changed in another document, or do you want to support it with edits as suggested and proceed to the first reading at an upcoming meeting? Kelly?
I will make a motion to support the document with the edits as discussed. If you're okay with that, Maria? Okay.
Can we confirm what those edits are? The road aesthetics being important for the county and the village developments along Railway Avenue and the 550 being 1, and then the committee consisting of 2 members of each council. Is that it?
That was the way it was, wasn't it? Presented as presented.
That's right, as presented, yeah.
Yeah. And the other ones were Tracy's proof or sort of little corrections? Okay. So Kelly has moved that we support the document as edited, I guess, as presented with edits, and provide direction to proceed to the first reading. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. And Maria, yes, you'll have to come back because we're a little bit behind schedule. Cole is here for 10:45. Fortunately, unless there's something going on that we don't know about, probably we can get back on base here with Cole's report. So that is item 11. Thank you. Item 11.1, welcome Cole.
Thank you, Reeve Douglas and councillors. I believe you all have a copy of my report.
Yes.
It's not too long again this month. We'll start off with the Hamlet distribution and wastewater systems. For the most part, normal observations were observed over the last month. We will be doing fall distribution system flushing. I mentioned that last time that I presented a report. It was pushed back a little bit due to the weather we've had over the last couple of weeks, but we hope to get that completed in the next couple of weeks. So I don't see any issues with that, so that'll be part of our fall maintenance for the distribution systems. Rural water, the County of Newell Rural Water Project, everything's running well with that. I've spoke with Jeff Tiffin on the ceasing of us giving out parts for the users in that system starting January 1. So we went over that, kind of gave him our thoughts on the wording of it. And so it'll be going out in everybody's water bills. So January 1st, everybody should know that, and all our operators are aware that we won't be continuing to give parts out for the emitter systems. Wastewater collection, the Scandia Lagoon discharge via irrigation was completed. So we've determined that the lagoons in Tilley and Patricia will not need to be discharged this year, just inadequate volume to even bother with that, so there's no issues with that. And that's an irregular occurrence. It's not like they all have to be discharged every year. We've seen that in the past, and mostly due to, well, part of it was that we've had a little less precipitation this summer, along with usage. So neither one poses a problem if we don't discharge. So that's good. And then the lift stations in the Hamlets, we're going to be cleaning them out in the coming weeks. That's part of our fall maintenance program. And once we're in there, specifically for Rolling Hills, we do some added maintenance to that because it's a corrosive environment in that one especially. So we'll upgrade some of the things that are being degraded due to corrosion in H2S. So that's part of the cleaning up and getting everything ready for the winter months. So that concludes my report, if there's any questions.
Clarence.
No, I can't remember where I read the part about the individual people being responsible for parts past the gate.
In our bills.
Was it in our bills?
Yeah, just came.
And I can't remember, and it just struck me now, but NRSC would still be willing to do it, but we will be charging the individual. Is that correct or not?
No, because we don't do any of the actual physical work due to liability. We're not journeyman plumbers or anything like that, so we've never done that. What we have done has been an intermediary between the county and the customer, so we'll come back and pick up parts here, like float valves and emitter parts, give them to the customers, then they'll find either they do it themselves or they hire someone to replace those parts. So moving forward, they'll have to procure the parts that they need moving forward themselves.
And where will it be at the county or will it be at NRSC, or they just go to the hardware store?
Go to the hardware store.
And we're comfortable with that?
Yes. NRSC has never had any of these parts. It's all supplied by the county. And these exact same parts are available at several places in town. So, but there's also other options to them. So if they want to go above and beyond to a different style of float valve or something like that, that can be done by them as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not so much worried about the people that want to upgrade, but I'm more worried about people who downgrade. I guess that's their responsibility. It has to be their responsibility. There's no way around it.
I think so. At some point, I think over the last several years, we're seeing that this isn't going away. It's pretty steady. A lot of times, it's due to people forget about it. They just get it installed, get it turned on, and then they don't look at it after that. And then when it malfunctions, stops working, they call the county or us. So I think to end the cycle, I've used the old analogy a lot of times is if you go buy a toilet from Home Depot, 8 years down the road, you don't go back to Home Depot and say, my toilet's not working. You go get the parts yourself and fix it. Same system inside, very similar.
Kevin?
Yeah, so Madam Reeve, I think what's going to be important is make sure there's an inspection whatever happens, if they switch out anything, we need to make sure that it's inspected, from my perspective, because somebody may bypass the float entirely. So, I mean, you have to have some type of a process to make sure that whatever's getting replaced is inspected to make sure that it's going to meet water flows, open flows, restricted flows, whatever, so that there isn't a T below it and somebody can bypass water, right? Because if they know that can happen, it will happen. I'm not saying in a great extent, but people will get around the system if it's not inspected.
That definitely is something that could happen. I like to have faith in people that wouldn't, but fact of life is that could. So from our standpoint, whenever we get called or contacted to shut off the water supply so that repairs can be made, when we go back to turn it back on, we'll request that we inspect, or we could even say when we turn off the water we need to have photos or something, or I don't know if you need eyes on. I imagine eyes on would probably be the best, but there again, there's so many different installation types out there where it might be a little difficult, but if we insist on that, then people know right away when we first turn off the water, then they can make arrangements for that. So,
Any other questions for Cole? And this is to happen January 1st, correct?
That's correct.
So we have a couple more meetings if people have other questions that arise from the thought. So, seeing no other questions then, thanks, Cole.
You're welcome.
Have a good rest of the day.
You as well.
And thank you to our delegation who are patiently waiting. We'll get you to join us at the table. This is item 9.1.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are lucky to have our investment advisors, James Hobson and Charit Chahal, with us today. They graciously offered to give us an economic update as well as a review of our investment portfolio. I thought the economic update would be good as we're going into budget discussions later this month, and I think we've had a pretty good year on the portfolio. So I'll turn it over to these guys for their presentation.
Thanks, Matt. We don't usually, do we sometimes have advisors come and give us an update, or do we rely on you usually?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Previously, when we had BMO, I think Vaughn, if you remember Vaughn, he's probably the last face you saw here. So these guys are a lot smarter than me when it comes to managing the portfolio. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity for council to see, peek behind the curtain, who's actually pulling some of the levers on our investment side of things. So,
excellent. Welcome, gentlemen. Should we do some introductions so people know where everybody's from? We are a big council of 10, and my name's Molly Douglas, and I come from the northern part of the county out by the Red Deer River. And we'll move over to Mr. Just there.
Good morning, Lionel Just, and I represent Division 10, which is north and east of Brooks.
Good morning, Anne-Marie Phillipson, Patricia area. This morning I read in the newspaper that we're reaching the tipping point for an economic recession, so it's going to be interesting to hear your point of view today.
Good morning, Huey Callan in Tilley, east of Brooks.
Brian DeJong, I represent the area around Dutchess.
Clarence Samuel, and I live in Rolling Hills.
Welcome, gentlemen. I'm Kevin Stevenson, County Administrator.
Good morning, I'm Tracy Fife, and I represent the area west and south around Brooks.
Good morning, Wayne Hammergan, Division 4.
Morning, I'm Kelly Chrisman from the west side of the county.
Good morning, I'm Ellen Unra, and I represent the countryside around the village of Rosemary.
Good morning, Ariana Nielsen, Executive Assistant.
Lane Johnson, the Director of Corporate Services.
Sandra Stanway is the Brooks Bulletin reporter, so that's who's behind you. And we'll go to you, gentlemen. You can tell us a little bit about who you are.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for the introductions and for having us here this morning. My name's James Hobson. I worked at CIBC Wood Gundy for about 12 years now. My colleague Charit Chahal, we're both CFA charter holders. This is all we do. Our focus is on municipal investment management. We currently manage long and short-term reserves for 10 cities, 17 counties, and 21 towns in Alberta. So you're in good hands. We've been managing the County Newell's investment portfolio for about 2 years now. Things are going very well. And we thought in discussions with Matt, we do a quarterly call. Things have sort of fundamentally changed in the world, especially in the last 9 months. From everything from interest rates, inflation, and growth, not just here in Alberta or Canada, but globally. So that has implications for how we invest the county's money. And so what we'd like to do is just give you kind of a lay of the land, a quick update on sort of what's happening in Canada, Alberta, and Charit will get into the States, and then just our investment policy recommendations. It's nothing major that we'd like to change, just small tweaks that will give us more flexibility and allow us to continue making as much money as we can for the county. So we'll jump right in here. I'll start off in Canada, and what I really want to hit home here is, I mentioned things have changed, and things have changed for a reason. We are entering what we'd call the mature phase of the business cycle. So we've had this long period of expansion in the US and around the world. Obviously, Alberta, we've had basically 2 recessions since 2014, so it's been a lot tougher here. But if we zoom out to the Canadian perspective, what we're seeing is a huge shift from last year, interest rates going up, central banks trying to slow growth globally, to the complete opposite now, where it appears that central banks globally had hiked interest rates too much too fast and put us in a bit of a precarious position, as you mentioned. Things are looking a bit dicey. We're seeing the Federal Reserve cut interest rates. The Bank of Canada will likely follow suit. And all in in sum, we are in the mature phase of the business cycle where basically we're either going to go into recession, or our hope and our forecast is that central banks have been able to respond quickly enough that we'd call this a mid-cycle adjustment, where basically we can adjust monetary policy just enough to keep us in this expansion track. That's a lot, but that's the lay of the land. So if we look at Canada as a whole, what we'd point out here, so we've got a growth forecast of 1.4%. That's from our chief economist at CIBC. But the risks are skewed to the downside. A lot of this is to do with the US-China trade talks, which we're going to get a lot of information actually this week. They're holding negotiations right now. A lot to do with Canada's relationship with China and whether or not that weakens. And that chart there just shows you, if you survey all the economists on Bloomberg, what their forecast is for Canadian growth. And you'll notice that there are very few forecasts that are 2% or higher. Our forecast is on the lower end of the range, between 1.4 and 1.5. But what you'll notice there is that the data is all skewed to the downside. So the risk here is basically that we can't get out of this rut, and we do go into recession instead of what our hope is that we go into a mid-cycle adjustment. So the Bank of Canada looks at this, they see the same data, and they're in favor of an insurance rate cut, which would basically take us from 1.75 to 1.5. We think this will happen in December or January. We're a bit ahead of the curve in terms of that forecast, but we think the market has underpriced the likelihood of a rate cut. I speak a little bit about recession risk just because it is out there, and the data is skewed to the downside. That said, a recession is negative growth. And what our view is, what our fundamental forecast is that we're still going to keep growing in a positive way, just at slower growth rates. So we're not going to have 3% growth. We're not even going to have 2% growth. We might have 1.5% growth around that area. But no negative growth as of yet on the horizon. Charit will get into the trade war stuff, and we're not here to try and forecast Donald Trump. But our hope is that cooler heads prevail, and that does have implications for Canada. So one other thing, the loonie we're forecasting to weaken through 2020. The US dollar has just been remarkably resilient. One of the issues here is there's about 17 trillion in globally negative yielding debt globally. So that pushes money to where it does pay interest, and one of those places is the United States. So we do see the loonie weakening into 2020. So I want to dig a little bit deeper here and go into sort of Western Canada and Alberta. The chart on the left there shows the growth forecast for 2019, 20, and 21 for the various provinces, and then the growth forecast for Canada on the bottom. The chart on the right there shows what we call economic momentum. And what you'll notice there, it's the Western provinces have had a really rough go. So the story here is that it's been tough, but there is a bright side on the horizon. Things should start to get better next year and beyond into 2021. So what we'll notice there is that 2018, those are the yellow bars. You can see economic momentum in BC and Alberta and Saskatchewan was pretty negative. We were losing steam, so to speak. But on the bright side, if we fast forward a year later, we are seeing that momentum improve. It's still negative, but it's improving. And it's reflected in the growth numbers there on the left. We forecast that we will be able to avoid a negative year here in Alberta. We came really close. We're forecasting around 0.5% growth. But things pick up again next year to 1.8, and then again quite a bit to 2.5 in 2021. And you can see that's significantly ahead of the national forecast there of 1.4, 1.9. So another just side note to point out, the China trade war is really having an impact on Saskatchewan here. You can see their economic momentum has actually fallen significantly since last year, in contrast to Alberta. So that is something to watch out for. But despite those mandated oil production cuts, we look like we should avoid a recession this year. One of the things that's doing is this is a big issue here, is interprovincial migration. So when there's not much capital spending in the oil patch, in other sectors, we get less people moving to Alberta to work here. It's pretty clear. And what happens is we end up with a large number of what they call unabsorbed housing units. So the chart there just shows Edmonton and Calgary, and this would apply to the county here as well. There are a larger number now of completed but unabsorbed housing units. So there's too much supply that's impacting property prices as well. And the reality here is, unless we see a larger scale return to oil investment, it's some more clarity on those key pipelines, it's going to be tough to attract people to the province. So that's kind of the key challenge that we're facing here in Alberta. In terms on the job front, as you all are probably aware, it's not been great. We're still running north of 7% unemployment, which is quite a bit above the national rate of 5.7. Earnings growth as well has been pretty muted, not keeping pace with inflation. Earnings growth is at 0.5% this year. And so the chart there just shows you the blue bars is the employment and the black line is unemployment rate. You can see over the last year, it's been pretty much flat. So we did have a bit of a boost out of that 2014-15 recession, but it has been a pretty flat year for Alberta. Like I said, the hope is things improve in the next year. Business investment's an interesting one. Obviously, no surprise to anyone, we've had a big change in the political atmosphere here in Alberta. We don't really care what side of the coin you're on in that debate there, but the reality is we have a bit of a louder voice for the oil sector, and we do have lower corporate tax rates. So corporate tax rates have already been lowered from 12% to 11%. They're targeting to reduce them further to 8% by 2022. So it is leading to a bit more business optimism, a little bit more capital spend is the hope, and at least in the medium term. So yes, it's been rough, but in the sort of medium term, so looking out 2-3 years, what the hope is that we'll attract capital to Alberta again with lower corporate tax rates and a little bit more capital spending. And then this just, the chart there just shows you how kind of tough it's been. It shows you the change in investment spending. 2019 was not a great year for investment spending. It fell compared to 2018. So that's kind of the global backdrop. I mean, we went from interest rates going up significantly in the fall of last year. Our view is that they'd hiked too much too fast, and that's what we implemented for the county's portfolio. On the bright side, we were right there. Interest rates are coming down, and for that reason, we need to reassess the investment policy. So I'll explain this chart here. We never do a presentation without it, and a lot of our councillors get tired of us talking about the yield curve. But this basically just shows you the interest rate that you get on different types of investments over different terms. So the blue line is bank bonds, the green line is provincial bonds, and the red line is Government of Canada bonds. First thing I'll point out is that the front end of that yield curve on the Government of Canada bonds is kinked down. That's what we'd call an inverted yield curve. And that's the bond market forecasting interest rate cuts by the Bank of Canada. It's also flashing a warning sign that, hey, if we don't do something, you're at risk of recession. The other thing we'll point out, so the green line is the provincial curve. Right now we're mandated to hold at least 25% in provincial bonds. That was great a year and 2 years ago when we could buy provincial bonds at 2.93%. Now those same bonds are yielding 2.1%, roughly thereabouts. So you can see there's a big pickup if you go from the green line to the blue line in terms of what interest rates we can get. Bank bonds have the same credit rating as the provinces. They're all rated A and AA. So there's no additional risk, at least from a credit standpoint, for moving from provincial bonds to bank bonds. This is a trend we're seeing. We manage over $2 billion. Most of our municipal clients are doing this, shifting out of provincial bonds into bank bonds. You get a much higher yield. It doesn't sound like a lot, but we can get more like an additional 0.5%. So we can go from, say, 2.2 to 2.7 and as high as 3.1 into bank bonds. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about $53 million, it adds up pretty quick. So that's kind of the rationale behind what we'll talk about at the end of the presentation, but that sort of gives you a lay of the land of the interest rate environment. And then lastly, just talking about interest rates, the question becomes globally is, how effective is monetary policy going to be going forward? With rates this low, does cutting interest rates further actually help? So cutting interest rates, the rationale behind it is you encourage people to spend money, save less, and borrow to spend, right? This chart shows you that our debt to disposable income, that's the red line, is about the highest in the world. So we have a lot of debt, a lot of credit card debt, a lot of auto debt, a lot of mortgage debt. And the savings rate, which is the yellow line, is the lowest since the 1960s. So Canadians, we've already spent a lot, we've already borrowed a lot. So if you cut interest rates, does that really have the desired effect? Well, we notice in places like Germany, once they cut below a certain level, the savings rate actually has the opposite effect. It actually goes up because people start to realize, I'm going to need more money in retirement to meet my withdrawal needs. So that's something the Bank of Canada is watching. For that reason, we don't think rates are going to go to zero. We think we'll see sort of a mid-cycle adjustment where we might see 1 or 2 rate cuts. But beyond that, monetary policy, it becomes pretty ineffective. What we really need is more fiscal policy, clarity on some of the political front. So just to summarize it, I think I've probably beat this to death, but Western Canada, we saw the biggest decrease in growth this year. We had pretty slow momentum in 2018, but going forward, things are looking a lot brighter. Obviously, we're coming up from a lower base. We're growing faster, but we're coming from a depressed level. Recession risk we view is still fairly low. The biggest risk to that is the trade front, which Chart's going to get into in a minute. The rate hike cycle is already over. It's a really good time to borrow money. Interest rates are very low, and we expect them to continue to fall into 2020. And inflation is steady. It's at the Bank of Canada's target of 2%. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Chart.
Thanks, James. So starting off with the United States is kind of fun for anybody in investment advisory portfolio management because it's a weird world where we'll wake up in the morning, check Twitter to see what's the president is going to do overnight to capitulate the market today, right? So the one key piece the way we like to break down the United States, and the way I'll break it down today is, as you pointed out, you're hearing the big R word pushed around every time you turn on BNN or whatever news channel it is. There is a recession, it's coming, when is it coming? And we've heard this, if you actually take a look at the news cycles, for quite some time now. So the first key theme and key element we want to talk about is, that we'll see on the news, is the period of time, that actual duration of the economic expansion in the U.S. it's been doing too good for too long. There needs to be a correction. This is the kind of story that's being kind of pushed along. Well, the economic fundamentals, yes, they still continue to support growth in the U.S. economy, and it is on pace to be the longest U.S. economic expansion. The question you need to ask, and we should all be asking ourselves, is the duration of an economic expansion the key measure of, and the key sign that we should kind of be worried about? The answer to that is, well, it all depends, because if duration is the key measure, you would still have technically nothing to worry about, because although in the US it's the longest in history, it's coming to be the longest in history, in terms of the global benchmark, Australia is now in its 28th year of continued growth with no signs of a correction coming. So relative to the world, it's still on pace for the longest economic expansion. The reality of any type of economic expansion is GDP growth, which is what that chart is showing you right there, taken alone is not the full picture. You actually need to start peeling back some layers to see what's going into the components of GDP growth to kind of look at how that's going to kind of affect the economy going forward. So if we take a look at what's actually happened between prior administration and current administration to affect GDP growth, and what are those components, well, you can see the biggest increase in components under Trump's administration. The two largest pieces on the top are there are higher government spending, so fiscal stimulus, and net trade. And those two key pieces happen to be the biggest things you're seeing on the BNN as well. So you're seeing tariff wars starting to shock the economy because, again, large portion of the GDP growth under current administration and higher government spending. Well, again, we're going to peel back those layers as well. We'll start with higher government spending and kind of see how that's kind of impacted. James kind of talked about it with the global economy in Canada as well, this mid-cycle adjustment. The U.S. has already started cutting rates in anticipation of a projected recession. What this chart is showing you is the impact of going from economic stimulus, which is what the U.S. is doing, to just shutting off the taps. It could affect your GDP by 1.3%, which is a massive global impact, not just in the U.S. So this is what the world sees, economists see, investors see, institutional investors all see this. So that mid-cycle adjustment, what the U.S. is doing is they're starting to cut rates in anticipation of this impact to mitigate the longer-term effects. So what they're doing is, instead of falling into recession territory, they're pushing it down the line. So from a sentiment standpoint, if you were to look at the news, fiscal stimulus, GDP growth, the mature phase of the business, take it all together, it's, oh no, growth is slowing, but you are still growing. You're still growing, you're just growing at a slower rate. That's what the mature phase of the business cycle means, which means not a recession, but sentiment will still drive volatility. So the sentiment is still there, but the fundamentals, as you can kind of see there, don't point to the sign of a recession. The second piece of GDP growth, I'm going to call it the name of the U.S., the Trump-China trade war at this point, that one has been, again, not the easiest to forecast in any way, shape, or form, but what I want to kind of do here is take a look at how it fundamentally impacts both sides of the argument here, from China and from the U.S. And so if we start with China, well, the People's Bank of China has always historically very vocally said we want to keep our target growth rate, call it around 6%. No matter what, we're going to keep our economy growing at 6% when using whatever tools necessary. We can see what the first impact of the first set of tariffs that the U.S. implemented did, is they put them right at the bottom of the range. The next tariff increase that they did, significant impact to what the GDP growth of China is. Again, this is a world-leading economy, so that impact doesn't stay within China, it ripples around the world, which is the sentiment, why you see the sentiment, the volatility, and the panic that kind of essentially happens every time Trump tweets about going hard against China. This is why everybody's kind of scared, because the impact to growth can be very large. But you got to look at it from another perspective as well, where this gives China a very large and strong incentive to get a deal done. Everybody can talk very strong, but if you don't have a deal done, you're going to impact your economy with a lot more negative effects than you wanted to in the first place. So there is incentive for China to kind of get a deal done. If we look at it from the U.S. perspective, what's happening on the U.S. side? Well, if you take a look at when China put their tariffs in on the U.S. side, we all heard about the soybean farmers being penalized, soybean farmers being Trump's voting base. Why is there incentive for the U.S. and specifically Trump to get a deal done is well, one, there's an election coming on, and two, you can see the Midwest exports specifically, what that chart is showing you, that vertical line there is right when China proposed the tariffs, and then the Midwest soybean farmers, the impact to their exports. So you can see a direct impact to his voting base. So there's very much a large incentive for him to get a deal done as well. Now, what that means in the long term is, yes, will a deal be done? It's not going to go to tariffs to a world of no tariffs. They're going to start to kind of chisel away, take piece by piece to negotiate back to something. And we've already heard the rhetoric come out this morning where China and US said they may come to some type of currency agreement, things like that. So you're starting to see that conversation already happen. I mean, it's been his playbook since the start of his election. Talk really, really hard that we're going to get a way better deal, rebrand it, give you the same deal a little bit better, and say you're welcome. It's how he does it. He acts tough and then kind of a little bit of concessions after the fact. So the U.S. election is the biggest piece. The second aspect here is he's actually hurting the working class in the United States as well. If you actually take a look at before the trade war, households in the bottom 10th of the United States spent 1.5% of their after-tax income on tariffs. It doesn't sound like a lot, but as soon as you put tariffs on there, a larger portion of your discretionary income starts to get impacted by the tariffs, because as a lowest income earner, you're looking for the cheapest goods. The cheapest goods essentially get imported from China, right? So the larger portion of your after-tax dollars now get spent on discretionary stuff, on everyday consumable goods, so you have less for savings. So this is another impact to another section of voters for the United States that he's impacting that hasn't been yet kind of reflected in the media. So fundamentally, very, very high incentive to get a deal done, because right now, although the bottom 10% may not know that it's Trump's tariff war that's hurting them, the long-term effects are going to be felt. So you need a deal done before that kind of happens. And then the sentiment aspect of the trade war, this is, again, speaks to the fun of being a portfolio manager in current day environments. We put this up there to kind of show you how it impacts the volatility. Trump will come out and say, we're going to get hard in China again. Well, Wednesday, August 14th, I'll focus on that change bar there right in the middle, all that red you see on the left-hand side. The market sold off, and it sold off really bad on that Wednesday. So it was a bloodbath, panic. Everybody said, oh, there's a recession. This is when the media comes out and says, here we go, the growth is going to fall, because they can see that percentage of GDP, it's going to be a large impact. But then the market starts to digest, and then the fundamentals start to come back into play. You can see by Friday, not even that long later, 2 days later, market's already corrected on the long-term fundamentals. So although sentiment does drive short-term change, the long-term fundamentals in the United States are still pointing towards economic growth. There is cause for concern where you get things like the Chinese trade war and stimulus to come in, but it looks like at this time, the U.S. is doing the right thing from a federal stimulus perspective to get ahead of it. And the tariff war, I don't want to say they're doing the right thing, because they shouldn't have been in this situation in the right place, in the first place, but the deal is being started to negotiate on both sides, because a longer term impact is good for nobody on both sides of that coin. So you can get really strong up front, but you do need to eventually get a deal, which is kind of where we've kind of ended up in the market now. Now I'm going to push it back over to James. He'll talk to you a little bit about what he's talking about from the investment policy and your guys' investment portfolio as well.
Perfect. So hopefully that's all made some sense. We covered a lot in a short period of time, but we're happy to open it up to questions later. So just from an investment update, like I mentioned, we've been managing the county's portfolio for 2 years now. I can tell you that our 1-year return is 9.1%, and I promise we didn't buy any stocks. What that was is when we felt interest rates had gone up too much too fast, in collaboration with Matt here, we extended the duration, and then we had excess capital gains from basically our bonds being bid higher. Essentially all that means is we locked in higher interest rates than you can get today, so our performance was very good. Our annualized performance since taking over the portfolio is 5.3% per year. Sorry, 5.1% per year. And obviously that's much higher than the average yield on any of the bonds in the portfolio. Excuse me. But what we'd like to do is going forward, a lot of those excess capital gains were from those provincial strip bonds. Going forward, if we leave those, the yield to maturity at market is more like 2.1. So if we hold those going forward, that's going to be what our return is, barring interest rates falling further. So what we'd like to do is tweak this investment policy to allow us to continue performing well for you. So these are the current investment policy constraints that we have. Obviously, everything we do is fully compliant with Alberta's Municipal Government Act, Section 250. Right now, we have unlimited provincial issues. We have a credit rating minimum of A, and we rely on Dominion Bond Rating Service. They're sort of the key kind of benchmark for credit ratings. Right now, we have a maximum of 25% per chartered bank and 75% total banks and 20% per bank. Those are the two lines that we'd like to change if possible. So these are our recommendations here. These are not anything out of the box. These would follow very closely with our other counties that we work with. So we would never recommend anything that's going to get you in trouble. So what we'd like to do is increase the long-term portfolio limit for securities guaranteed by a bank, not a tier 2 bank, but a charter bank. So CIBC, Royal, TD, BMO, Scotia. From 75% cap to unlimited, essentially. So we can invest the whole portfolio into bank guaranteed bonds. And then the other thing we'd like to do is increase the maximum issuer limit from 20% to 25%. So all that means is, right now, if we're looking at 5 different bonds from 5 different banks, there might be a really good bond from BMO, but we can't buy it because we're capped on BMO, right? So we'd be forced to buy a lower yielding bond that's with a different bank. So what we'd like to do is just have a little bit more flexibility, not a lot more, but a little bit more. When it's prudent to do so, increase our allocation to one bank from 20 to 25%. We often don't hit those caps, but it's often prudent to do so. The other comment we had on the investment policy is we'd like to reference the CFA Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. Chart and I are both CFA charter holders. This is the gold standard for global investment ethics. And all it will do is it'll reference a comprehensive ethical standard which will ensure the county's needs always come first. Every decision has to benefit the county first ahead of anyone who's involved with the investments. And then the last point is just to increase the maximum term limit for the short-term portfolio from 1 year to 1.5 years. So not a huge change on any of those points. I think it is important to add that code of ethics. It'll make sure that whether it's us managing the portfolio or someone else down the road, hopefully it's still us, but if it's someone else, they have to be held to the gold standard for investment ethics. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
One thing I just want to add to as well with this investment policy that James was talking about is those first two pieces that he's talking about there, the one key piece to remember is the investment quality of the portfolio is staying the exact same. Because again, when we talk about credit ratings, you're not changing like credit quality. Everything is staying the same from the overall quality of the portfolio. It's still all principal guaranteed product. It's just making sure that we can essentially maximize the opportunity or minimize the opportunity cost of the portfolio while taking no additional risk, essentially, in the portfolio is all we're talking about here.
Questions? Wayne, I know we are supposed to have a public hearing, but there are no people here, so I'll take the liberty of finishing this off, but we will get the public hearing done before lunch. Wayne?
I just need this going from 75% to 100%. Now, what exactly, you probably explained it twice here, and it flew over like a bird, but what exactly do you mean by that? Like in dollars?
Sure. So right now, we're forced to own 25% of the portfolio in provincial bonds.
Okay.
Those bonds have very low yields now. So it made sense 2 years ago when we could get 3% on a provincial bond. Now we can only get 2% on a provincial bond. If we go back to that yield curve, we can get better returns for owning bank bonds versus provincial bonds. So all we're saying there is remove that requirement for us to own 25% provincial bonds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matt, why was that requirement there?
That's a good question, right? Anytime we change something, what was the initial impetus behind it? The current investment policy, 2014, I think was the first time we had updated it for a very long time. I know speaking with Vaughn, he had a lot of input on that. I think really for us, when we're looking at compiling a portfolio, you want diversification in there, so you want a number of different issuers. It's the same argument for, you know, why did we have 20% limit on chartered banks? We're just looking at not putting all of our eggs in one basket. So I think the conversation now where we're looking at the credit quality of the issuers, where the provincial and the chartered banks are the same, it's a good argument to say, well, that 75% is really arbitrary, and it puts us in a spot where we're not maximizing our returns on the portfolio.
Kelly?
Matt, do you have any concerns about any of these suggested changes?
No, I got back from an investment workshop, and part of that workshop was looking at what should be included in your investment policy statement. So I threw some of these out to James and Charit to look at, and they said, yeah, no, probably makes sense, and asked them for their input. So I know later today we've got this on the agenda. So I'm comfortable with all the recommendations they've made here.
Other questions? Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was well done, not too complicated for the normal mind to comprehend, or my normal mind anyhow, and clear and concise. So excellent job, and keep up the good work. And thank you for coming out and spending time with us today. If you would like to join us for lunch, there's always extra food here too, so. All right, we will go back on our agenda to our public hearings. And so first we need a motion to move into public hearings. Kelly moves us in. All in favor? Opposed, motion is carried. And we'll turn it over to Maria. It's road closure and sale, Northwest 3113 and Southwest 6 of 14. Item 7.2.
Okay, hi. The purpose of this public hearing is to close the road allowances shown on this map and transfer to the applicant to facilitate their current farming operations. So they're irrigating on a portion of that road allowance currently. So this road closure was initiated as a result of a letter that was sent to the landowner from the county. And at that time, the landowner had indicated that there was a verbal agreement between the previous landowner and the county where these road allowances were traded for lands that were used to construct Highway 875. And there was no indication of that in the file, but in the approval to proceed meeting on December 6, 2018, it was moved by Councillor Phillipson that we proceed with the closure and transfer of this road allowance at no cost to the applicant. Although the applicant will be responsible for acquiring surveying services and covering all the costs associated with the closure, subdivision, consolidation of this road. There is also currently, or there was an approval of a subdivision that's shown here. So this subdivision will include this portion of road to be closed with it. So there will be, this is also in conjunction with the EID. There's some land trading going on to make everything work. And so to provide access to EID, they will provide an access easement when they register on title. There was no responses from or no objections from any of the referral agencies. Municipal Services and ORS support the closure and transfer application. And we recommend that this bylaw, for the purpose of closing to public travel and transfer of portions of the roadway, be given or be approved and given first reading when it comes to that time.
Questions? Kelly?
Maria, for clarity, I'm looking at the map that has a long yellow road and the portion to be closed. That's it. So the red is not to be closed, just the yellow.
So the red shows the current parcel, the current parcels and property lines. So that yellow line is encompassing all of the road allowance that's on the west side of the highway. So yeah, that's all, just where the yellow is, and then everything in red will, well, with the subdivision, with the subdivision, the parcels on the west side of the highway will all be consolidated. So those red lines will change a little bit as the parcels change with the subdivision, but that road in yellow is what will be consolidated into that portion, and just that portion. Yeah.
So my question is, why are we closing that little piece only to the river? Or to the river, yes.
So, sorry, just this piece as well, because it's also being irrigated. If we close the north-south portion of the road and leave that portion, then it's really just a remnant piece of road. It wouldn't be connected to anything, and it is being irrigated. So I think that just to encompass the whole part that's being farmed and being encroached upon, we need to close that whole area.
Any other questions? Clarence?
I think Kelly's question was, why is the red? Is that a road allowance? It would also be a road allowance. Is that already been closed? I know it is on the other side at some point, but the big part of the red line in the circle, there, that one, is that still open?
Okay, I see what you're saying. That must have been closed at one point, or
is it a road allowance? I'd have to.
Or a road plan. That's a good question. That I don't know exactly. But yeah, because it's not attached to the grid, unfortunately I don't know exactly, sorry. But because it doesn't extend east, that road is either a road plan or what has been east has been closed already.
Going, well, and I'm not quite sure where the road allowance, but it must be a road allowance because we're closing that little chunk there of yellow, so. And on the east side of the road, 875, I think it was sold to them because they needed access to their place, and before I was ever on council, that was closed and sold. And I'm just wondering if the west side was too, but I don't know. And if it isn't, then we still have more to do there.
Okay, I have a map here, and it shows that across the river in the municipality of Tabor, it is a road allowance. So what is on this side here, that has already been closed. So that little piece is just what's left over from the road allowance that has been closed previously.
Other questions or clarification? Seeing no further questions, then we need a motion to move out of public hearing. Tracy will move us out. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And that takes us to the bylaws. Item 8. For first reading. Someone would like to make that motion, Wayne? This is a motion for the closing of those portions of the road that we just discussed. Be given first reading. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Marie. I think is that everything for you today? Okay. Thank you. So Director of Corporate Services, there is a request for a decision in regard to municipal emergency management. So item 8.2.
So this particular item is before Council because of changes that have been made at the provincial level with regards to the way emergencies are managed provincially and are being pushed down locally. We have had in place an emergency management bylaw for quite some time. There have been changes made in the provincial legislation that require changes made in the local bylaws as well. Really, the intent of the bylaw that's before you for consideration today, it clarifies the two primary bodies that are involved when it comes to managing or preparing the county to manage for emergency situations. With the previous legislation, the two committees were an emergency management committee and an emergency management agency. So the committee was different than the agency. What the effect of the provincial legislation changes have created for the county is the first one, the Emergency Management Committee, now needs to be called an Emergency Advisory Committee so that it's very clear to everyone that that particular group has a specific role and it is limited to providing advice to the Emergency Management Agency and also to Council. The Emergency Management Agency is the organization that is responsible for managing the emergency event and the response to that event. Whereas the Emergency Advisory Committee, its role is to help the municipality plan and prepare for the implementation of actions that need to be taken during emergency events. The bottom line is that what you have before you is a bylaw that amends or would, if approved, provide for the amendments that are required to go forward and be fully compliant with the provincial legislation. What we are recommending at this point is that it be given first reading. It opens the bylaw up for review. We would engage the fire chiefs on this particular matter so that they're clear as well as to what the potential changes would mean for their fire departments. If there are some specific questions that Council has, we can certainly try and address those. It should also be clear that the changes that have been initiated at the provincial level are also going to require the members that are on the Emergency Advisory Committee to receive training for their role. It is going to be mandatory to undertake annual exercises as well to make sure that the organization is in a position to implement a state of local emergency if it's ever required. The whole purpose of the changes that have been initiated at the provincial level is just to make sure that municipalities across the province are ready for events if situations do arise. One other thing to note, it's timely that this is before you today. On October 23rd, for those members that are on the Emergency Advisory Committee, there is training that has been scheduled from 8:30 to 11:30, I believe it is, at the Brooks Fire Hall. and it is going to provide the training that is required for the members of the Emergency Advisory Committee for the elected officials that are on that committee. That wraps it up. If there is some questions, I can attempt to answer them.
Questions? So, Clarence.
So who's on these committees? Give me, so that I get a picture of how to compare them to what we have today.
The county's Emergency Advisory Committee, there are 3 members of council that are appointed to that. Again, previously it was the Emergency Management Committee. If the bylaw goes through as proposed, there will still be 3 members of council on there. In addition to the elected members that are on there, the Director of Emergency Management would be on there, and also the Deputy Director of Emergency Management and the CAO would be on there as well. That group is to work with the Emergency Management Agency on an annual basis to undertake a review of the emergency plan and ensure that the county is prepared to respond to emergency events. The Emergency Management Agency consists of the Director of Emergency Management, the Deputy Director of Emergency Management. There would be a number of other agencies that would also be involved. Those would consist of the police department, other fire departments, utility companies, any external organizations that we would want to bring into an emergency operations center to assist in coordinating the response and taking control of a major emergency event. So the Emergency Management Agency elected officials are not represented on that body. You're assigning the responsibility for the event, for managing the event, to that group of individuals. After the event is over, then the Emergency Advisory Committee can sit down, assess how well we managed it, what needs to change, if there's some tweaking that needs to be done, but it separates the planning from the management of the event.
So on October 23rd, there's training that would involve council members, or not?
Correct.
Yes.
It would involve those members that are on the Emergency Advisory Committee, of which there are 3. If all of council wanted to be involved with that, they certainly could, but at a minimum, the members that are on that committee should receive that training. It doesn't mean that they have to be there on the 23rd. There may be other opportunities in the future, but this is the first one that is being set up to provide that training.
Okay, well, that's good, because the next day is our organizational meeting, so things could change. Yeah. Okay, questions? Otherwise, okay, Hubie.
I think it's Molly, Tracy, and myself, right now.
Thanks, Hubie. Okay, the recommended action is that we approve first reading of a bylaw to update our bylaw, basically, in this emergency management bylaw. And then there would be time before the second and third readings so that the fire chiefs within the county could discuss it in October as well, which makes a whole bunch of sense. Question, Trace?
Move for first reading.
Okay. Tracy will make the motion for first reading. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And it looks like the next thing on the agenda would be the division into the classes of the non-residential assessment. So we'll leave that till after lunch. And also at 1 o'clock we have a delegation too. So what time would you like to reconvene? Get Matt in here, you mean early is that one? 1:45? Okay, 12:45 we'll reconvene. Sounds good.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As everybody knows, the region is white, has been green, is white again. The most significant thing, starting the evening of September 28th and ending on September 30th, we had about 30 centimeters of snow delivered to our region. With that, the interesting part was the ground temperature was still promoting the melting of snow and whatnot, but the accumulation was fast enough that we had about a 2 to 3 inch layer of heavy slush develop due to the snowfall. With the plow trucks, I know some ratepayers have been questioning why our plow trucks weren't out. With the plow trucks, they don't have any weight on the front plow to keep that plow down on the ground, so when there's enough force pushing against that blade, it'll actually lift that blade up and they'll not be pushing what they need to be pushing. So the 8 graders were put onto our paved roads first to get those paved roads cleared off before anything else was touched. We had some lengthy discussion about gravel roads and how do we put graders out on gravel roads without picking up all the gravel with that heavy slush and throwing it in the ditches as well. So we relied upon everybody's patience in the region to let things do their kind of natural course and melt off on its own. There were a few instances where graders were out to try to remove some of the more significant drifted areas and stuff like that, but really trying to be responsible and accountable without risking any public safety factors and stuff in those decisions. So thankfully we didn't get the 95 centimeters of snow that Waterton got, although they only have a couple of roads that they got to worry about in that area, but we were far better a little bit further north than what our neighbors were to the south. With that, grader operators, you know, we were just in the discussions of getting ramped up and getting the equipment scheduled to come in to throw on the winter attachments and stuff. We do strive to have that completed by October 15th every year. This is year number 3 that we've been burnt in a row where winter snow events have shown up at the beginning of October. So we will be looking at amending that strategy at least to be a little bit better prepared for things, but at the same time, we weren't unprepared for what was coming because we knew well in advance of it just how significant it was going to be the issue. October 4th, the gravel road resurfacing program was completed, so a little bit of an update from when I wrote my report. And they are continuing to get the 25 millimeter surfacing gravel spread across the road shoulder pulls in the Tilley area, hopefully to be done mid-October. So we're just wrestling with those road conditions as they sit today, trying to get them into shape before we do the final graveling, but to get that done. Gravel foreman's working on the 2020 plan for what roads will be resurfaced, and his seasonal term will be completed October 30th, so that's coming in the near future. Other than that, what other highlights we got? EID partnership, just another update on that after nearly 2 years of submitting the land acquisition documents to the Crown. We finally got that land purchased, which is just a mile north of Millicent on the old, well, the still Buck for Wildlife project. So the EID crews have actually mobilized in there to complete the rest of that project. Along with that, we've also had to deal with the species at risk, being the northern leopard frog, due to the habitat and stuff in that area. So the October period is when we had to hold off on the last 100 meters leading up to each of the canal banks in those areas. So 25 warnings, 13 tickets issued through municipal enforcement following 20 investigations over the month. Based on the traffic safety calendar that we have with items, officers monitored for compliance, issuing 5 tickets there, 7 warnings based on cycling and back to school and alcohol and drug impairments and speed. So keeping up with that stuff. And we've been working in Westland Acres right now where some landowners have taken initiative to locate their private fences on road allowance. We flagged one of them earlier this year when they were looking to relocate their fence, so we thought that's an excellent time to catch somebody to get it so there's no additional burden or cost. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with that through legal matters, and those will get addressed here soon. So we do have one party that's cooperating at this time, but the second party is in receivership right now, and the third party is not working well with us, so further steps will be taken on that to get that work completed. And yeah, road tour, it's been a little while, but road tour, thought it was great. Trying to talk over top of the noises of a school bus and address everybody on the bus was a challenge, of course. I thought the day was great. Feedback from the survey was great. Definitely took some key things away from that if it's council's decision to continue with that one-day format and do what we did, that we will amend how we do our introduction of items, where we will have a few planned stops around down the road to talk about, where we will physically stop on the road, and then while we're carrying down the road, we will leave you each to your own reading materials and or conversation amongst each other that you're sitting close to. So the only other thing we kind of talked about following that was, is September the best period? Is there a period of time that perhaps maybe we could look at that we could actually get some meaningful stops along the way and be introduced to some of our operations and operators throughout our region? You hit the September period and everybody's kind of in harvest, and to stop in and interrupt what they're trying to get done in their busy schedules is, I guess, not as desirable as the off season, right? So we got some things that we want to work on with that. So yeah, thought it was really good otherwise. And other than that, just scheduled to take a bunch of emergency management training based on the new legislation that's coming out and being put in place for the beginning of 2020. And I'll also be up in Lethbridge, or down in Lethbridge here next week, attending a public works supervisor session to see how that is, and if I continue with future sessions after that. So if there's any questions of council, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions? Tracy.
Mark, I maybe having a blonde moment, but do we have 3 peace officers now?
No, we only have 2. At one period of time, we had a seasonal bylaw officer that council approved for 1 season in budget, and after that, we've returned back to the 2. Other discussions were surrounding EID potentially increasing the number of hours that they expected for patrol along their lands. They have not confirmed anything yet, so when you get your budget package that's supposed to be delivered to you on the 18th of October, you will see that our budget is status quo. If the EID comes forward in the near future, or even after we pass interim, we will bring that discussion up and talk to council of how we accommodate it inside of the budget for amendments and stuff. So,
Other questions? Mark, I might have missed it, but on the water registrations, is that 5 new registrations since the initial $1,000 deal?
That is not 5 since the original registration cutoff application period, because we have had new people come, some people fall off, but we have had 5 new people come through the last month to register.
Okay. And that means that they are fairly committed to making it happen?
Yes. Yeah, and 11 new activations. That's the most we've moved in a long time with new people turning on the taps to receive water. So I had to verify that through 2 different people, because I'm like, that doesn't look right. But some of that was actually tied to the period that the individual on staff responsible for utility billing and stuff had been gone for a small, well, I shouldn't say a small period, but an extended period of time, not normal vacation. And when they came back, they got caught up on their paperwork. So some of those numbers might actually be from the August period as well. But lots of new activations. That's positive to see.
Good. Anything else for Mark? If not, we need a motion to accept municipal reports. Brian moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And Mark, you're part of the 1 o'clock delegation. So, and there are people coming in, right? Yes. Okay, well, we will wait a bit. Maybe I'll just here, it's not sort of post-agenda, because I didn't put it on post-agenda, but Ariana yesterday sent out information about the meetings, the RMA meetings, and wanted some help filling in the environment and parks response. And on Tuesday at our joint services meeting, there was talk of concerns about the parks budgets. And so I think if we could, I'm not sure, they want quite a bit of information, I believe, but there's concern about the funding for programs and things like at Dinosaur Provincial Park in particular. So if we could add that to the environment and parks issues to discuss, and those are budget issues and how the budget is changed or something. Not just with the new government either, was it? Lionel and Tracy, Kevin, you were there. It was just sort of something that's been happening for the last 6 months by the sounds of things. Trace?
I think sort of the way Barry explained it was that, yeah, it's been happening, and as they're, like Dinosaur Park in particular, as they're getting ready to start sort of budget for next year, they're, in short, they're basically, the Alberta Parks has taken away the revenue stream from going back into that park, and that they've placed quite a few restrictions on expenses. And so, like, the example he gave was, if during the season they were selling like oodles and oodles of ice cream, then he couldn't necessarily just go buy more ice cream because it wasn't preset in the budget for operations. And then it's not showing the revenue stream, so then they would have to make a decision over the 3 parks, like Kinbrook, Tillybrook, and Dinosaur. If there was some irrigation needs that needed to happen, say at Kinbrook, well, do they put in irrigation or do they buy more ice cream? So Barry was going to get some more talking points and some more information for us, but he had asked, yeah, if we could talk a little bit about that and maybe see if we can't redirect that process a little bit.
Yeah, it seemed really strange. Jessica Surgener spoke about the staff. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Lionel and Tracy, the staff at Dinosaur Park forming a society, a nonprofit, Friends of Dinosaur Provincial Park, to be able to do programs. And as soon as I hear somebody's formed a Friends of somebody, it usually means they're doing that so they can go to a casino and raise money. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it sounds like that Friends of the Park or Friends of Dinosaur Park are getting quite active, and that they wanted to do, several fundraisers and because they want to ensure that the programming exists. And I think you can, where did she say you could look them up on the region, Brooks Region website?
Oh,
I
maybe.
can't remember that you
I
could
don't
actually
know.
look them up.
This is all secondhand information, Sandra. So if you, friends of Bazan or friends of Dinosaur Provincial Park, there's obviously somebody, Amory, do you know anything about it, or somebody that might know more about it?
What I know is basically what you said. They had a meeting, I think last week or a week and a half ago, to get started. And it was to continue programs or even increase the programming because the government was not doing it.
Okay. Which is really quite crazy, because apparently Dinosaur Park's programs have been really successful and have brought a lot more people into the park, which is good for all of us. So, Ariana, also an update. Municipal Affairs and Parks will give us a response the week of October 28th as to whether or not they're going to even have a meeting with us, right? So, and there has been absolutely no response from the Minister of Community and Social Services, which would be the FCSS concern. So, Brian.
So I put energy and parks on that list, and I think one of the two critical things, or the three items that I wanted to highlight, were North Headgate storm and wetlands review and how that pertains to environment. And the other one that I talked about with Kelly and Kevin this morning was the Pisano storm hold-up situation that we have been drawn into as a county. And I know that I'll talk to Jeff so he can get some specific speaking points, because I think that's what you were after. And as far as the WPACs, I'll provide that for you too, as far as the significance of how they relate to our area. The other thing that I was hoping we could as a council do, that whoever, if we are accepted as that we invite our MLA to attend with us.
All the meetings.
Any ones that we do get, that we ask Michaela to participate in our meetings.
Okay, that sounds good. And any of our urban partners that go along, obviously, as well. So sometimes if they are restricting the number of people that attend, we will have to, some of us will have to drop off, because if we have urban people, urban counselors that want to attend, and it's good for them to come along. So we'll wait and see. The week of October 28th puts us into not really knowing what's going on until November 7th council meeting. But at least we'll know. Anything else on meetings?
Just that you don't have to wait till November 7th. If I hear about a meeting, I'll just email and let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. And it's only Environment and Parks that wanted this information. The others were fine so far. It's the first time they've really wanted a template of what it is you're going to talk about. And I don't know if that's to pick who gets to see them, or just to make sure that it isn't just like it used to be, a hello and political schmoozing event, sort of. So, all right. Should we carry on then, Mark? Oh, Tracy knows who's coming, so. We can go to item 10.3.1, the policy review. Is it 10.3.1 or 10 something. I think Matt sort of referenced it. It's on page 2 and it's 10:04. To give our delegation some more time to get here. Policy review regarding investment, and Matt doesn't need to be here for this, I don't think, or came from Matt, but...
He also has the other bylaw on here for the split in the assessments as well.
Right, that's why it's there. All right, well, we will leave that alone then. We'll go to checks for payment. How about? Any questions on, oh no, we have some that we have to. We have over $350,000 PDF for Cortec, our dust calcium people, so we need a motion for that. Anne-Marie moves. All in favor? That's item 10.6. And our payment register. Okay. We'll look at the payment register for council, item 10.7. See if there's any questions for that. No questions? Then we'll get a motion. Lionel makes a motion to accept the payment register. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And we'll go back to 1 o'clock delegation then. Mark? Item 9.2.
If I can start.
Oh, yes, sure, Tracy.
I'll just kind of speak on behalf of the ratepayers from the Preeny subdivision.
Thank you.
They had called, recently the county's put up some signs along their cul-de-sac, and it's posted as a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed zone. The residents there had called to request if that could be dropped to a 30-kilometer-an-hour, in that their thoughts are like it's not the residents that are speeding. It's visitors, people coming in, which should be managed by the people they're coming to see. But and they have a lot of kids and stuff that live right along that strip, and they had felt that if the speed limit was 30, then people would actually maybe drive 50, whereas if it's 50, they would probably go to 70. So that was just the request, was that if it would be a consideration that we could lower the speed limit to 30.
So were there signs already in place, or these new signs, or Mark?
So similar to the Hamlets, what we've been working across the last year is getting all the signage in all of our rural or multi-lot subdivisions updated, consistent, so people are seeing potentially change where it's always been, just not as recognizable because the sign placement has changed or the sign is new, stands out more than what it did in the past. I guess really that this is the first instance that I've heard of this within the department. I don't have anything through the Newell Connect system to tell me that there's been any complaints. I don't have anything in the Omnigo/Report Exec software from enforcement services to say that anything has been filed as a complaint in the past. Now, with the bylaw, it currently states that all hamlets, subdivisions, and service roads are to be posted at 50 kilometers an hour. That is a bylaw the County Council obviously passes. Admittedly, it does have that language in there that unless otherwise posted, Council does have the ability to amend any or all speed limits as council determines to be suitable for the situation. We do have one multi-lot residential subdivision immediately on the west side of Brooks, Westland Acres, that has been 30 kilometers an hour since prior to my time here at the County of Newell. I tried doing some research on that to find out what events took place to drive that, and I found nothing in council minutes, in the former municipal meeting minutes, or anything in the Laserfiche records with respect to that. So I don't know how that one got put into the 30 kilometer an hour area. Similarly, we also have hamlets out there. Some of them are posted at 50, some of them are posted at 40. It's kind of been a communal decision as to how council has settled with those situations. Unfortunately, since I've been aware of this situation, I did request enforcement get the speed spies out there, the non-intrusive little boxes that go on a post that don't flash any numbers at you. They're just a gray box that may make you question what they are or what they're doing. We were hoping to gather some of the traffic data, the speed data. Unfortunately, it came back with about 540 vehicles going in and out of that subdivision, which enforcement is having a difficult time believing. So we want a different period of time to look at, to maybe reconfigure where that speed spy is located and have a bit more accurate data for council's consideration. So as it sits today, without having that data available for council to debate, unless it is council's preference to either amend the bylaw or request administration to bring the bylaw back to amend that location, or that we want to make a decision of keeping the speed limit posted as it is today, it's really at council's discretion. One option that I did not identify on my RFD, which I had in my head and failed to write down, was if we consider one multi-lot residential subdivision, should we be considering all of them? So I will leave you with those three options, and if we would rather defer until there is some statistics for council to make a decision on, or if you would rather make a decision today and move beyond, that I will leave for your decision.
Is it Johnson subdivision, or is there one other one that is 30? Johnson's or Mortenson's?
Yes, Mortenson was down to 30 a number of years ago as well.
Still, or has it been posted at 50?
Yes, it still
well?
is. And in that case, I don't think when you first drive into Mortenson that you could ever hit 50 kilometers an hour before you hit a 90-degree bend, which just north of that also exists a T intersection, and then you've got a straightaway after that. So I don't know how that decision was made either, other than a request of residents, in my opinion.
Kelly?
So you bring up the word residents, and it's mentioned here, residents request. How many residents are we talking about? Is this 1, 2 families, two properties, 3 properties? That makes a difference too.
I actually can't answer that one because I've had no information come direct to me. This one would be coming through your elected official for that region.
The conversation I had was, and I think, is there 8? I'm just trying to think of how many places there is. I think there's 8.
It's close.
Around there, 8 or 9. And the conversation was that it was unanimous. And the fellow that I talked to was going to get a letter to bring today, that if people couldn't come, that he would have a letter signed by them, that they were all in agreement of it. But he just, miscommunication, he thought he was still waiting for me to get back to him, but I had confirmed it. So as far as I know, that all of the people that live on that road.
Kelly.
So in light of that, can we wait until we have correspondence in writing? And if all 8 agree, I mean, it's a done deal in my mind, but I'd like to see some hard copy
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'd also be interested in the data from the speed spies too, because those are they are inobtrusive, and it does take people, like, lots don't even know what they are even, and I know myself, I know what they are, but it still takes me a minute to go, oh, it's right there, right? So it's a good way to collect data, and I'd be really interested to just get some feedback in that route too. And then, yes, I could get back to the residents and have them follow up.
Is there just one way in and out? So, is that we'll wait for more information? Brian?
Is there any enforcement done in these subdivisions?
We do make patrols, but again, if there's no traffic or anything going on, we don't see anything. So that's why we look to deploy the speed spies to see what activities were taking place and what times of the day, so that we could schedule more targeted enforcement activity to see what was going on and get some corrective action if necessary.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good suggestion to wait for the people to sign a letter that says they support that, and if it's unanimous, I would support that too. But if we had enforcement, I'm curious to see after a year whether the same group would be in here asking for it to go back up to 50. So
30's mighty slow. Lionel.
So was the request because of safety for children, or was it the request just from adults for, well, for whatever reason? Reason I ask that is, so Westland Acres is at 30. I've been in Westland Acres 100 times in the last number of years, and I have never yet remember seeing a child on the road. And nobody drives 30 there.
Well, it's not the best place to play. Tracy?
Like I say, I can only speak for the conversation I had, and I don't go down there a lot, so I can't say for sure, but it was the overall just safety, yes, of children, animals, there's a few with lots of, livestock, just in that vehicles get going really fast down there. So, but yeah, there's quite a few kids that live in that section there.
I think we're missing something here. This could be a great business opportunity. We can get some photo radar, and we could balance our budget a lot easier. If anybody who's watching, just kidding.
We'll wait to get more information then. Thank you, Mark. And now that Matt is in our presence, we will go back to the top of page 2, so I can get some order back in this agenda here. Bylaw 1962-19, item 8.3.
We like bylaws, right? Man, it feels like it's been a whirlwind the last little bit, responding to provincial things. So we had discussed at our budget planning meeting the policy option of dividing the non-residential assessment class, which is kind of the first step for us to undertake if we are to consider in the future potentially applying a lower tax rate to small business properties. So the first bylaw here, 1962, looks at splitting that class. Council by bylaw must split the class if we want to have that option. We define small business property in this bylaw as those properties where the employee count across Canada is 50 or less, That is straight out of the MGA. Council does have some discretion if they wanted to say, well, 25 or less, 30 or less, 40 or less. I'm not sure how you do the calculus on that, so I just left it at the 50 or less across Canada. So that's the first bylaw. The second one is how are we going to collect small business information? So I've reached out to a number of our peers who've already undertaken this. County of Vermilion River, Cypress County, MD of Acadia has undertaken it. Approach varies. Some reached out once, established who qualified for the small business property, got the count, and they're not doing much with it moving forward. So their data will be good day one, but 5 years down the road, they'll have to decide what to do. What I've recommended in the bylaw is that as of September 30th is when we'd expect a declaration for the number of employees at September 30th for a business, and we'd expect to receive that by December 31st this year. So our assessor will send out the request for information as part of the assessment process to figure out which categories to put these businesses in, and that could be a relatively simple thing to mail out each year, or we could just do it this one time to establish what the lay of the land is, because I can't tell you of our 50 some odd million dollars in commercial assessment, how much of that would be small business. So it will be interesting to see what portion of that actually comes back as a small business property. So those are the two bylaws. Just because we split the assessment does not mean you have to offer a lower tax rate to the commercial guys, but speaking with Kevin Halstead, who just came back from a meeting with his provincial assessor group, they were meeting with the folks at the province, and they said, well, expect, about a 30% reduction in your linear, not just shallow gas, like linear total. So if I do the math on a 30% drop in assessment on the linear side, of which I think the commercial is about 8% of the total, if we want to collect the same total dollar amount, our mill rate would have to go from, I think it was around 8 last year, to over 11, which would be like a 41% increase for our small business guys. So if you had a building worth $1 million, you would have paid, just over $8,000 in municipal taxes, just our share in 2019. And if we actually see that assessment drop of 30% on the linear side and we want to collect those dollars, we apply that 11.47 mil, and we'd be collecting another $3,400 from that property worth $1 million bucks. So I'm guessing a 42% tax increase probably isn't in the cards for our small business guys. So I think strategically this opens up the door for us to ease the pain and have a little more dynamic strategy how we respond to these assessment changes expected to come down the pipes.
Questions for Matt? So by gathering this information, we would have an idea of even how many businesses there are in this category.
Right, yeah, right now we don't know how many would even be there. With 50 or less, we haven't been collecting any kind of information that way.
Other questions? Other thoughts?
I would just mention, Councillor Kalin had asked, would this apply to somebody who, runs a trucking business out of their shop or has a small home business? And yes, it would. So when somebody takes a permit out for a home-based business, Kevin Halstead, our assessor, will look at the property and evaluate what portion of that should be assessed as commercial versus what should be assessed as residential. So
that's always happened though, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. So somebody in a situation now where we're potentially looking at needing to respond to the loss in assessment with an increase in our mill rate, depending how aggressive you want to recover some of those dollars that you might lose, and where you want to be in terms of competition with other municipalities on your non-residential mill rate. Those small business people working out of their home could see some higher impacts on the commercial side of what the property's assessed at.
Wayne?
I support this because it gives us a lot of flexibility. And I think we're going into a period where we need this.
Kelly?
Well, it falls in line with what Jason Kenney's plan is. We heard at AUMA that he's relegating that to all municipalities to protect the small business and to lower their taxes. It has to be recovered somewhere, so you take it away here, and or you give it here, where do you take it away from? So it has to be recovered. My question is, and maybe I'm having a moment, but how does this work for rental properties? The title is in maybe a personal name or a numbered company name. So how does that, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so if the property is being rented or leased by a business with less than 50 employees, it would qualify. So even though it's maybe Matt Fensky, I own a property, I lease it out to a small business, the owner doesn't have to have the 50 or less employees, it's the business operating out of the property.
Follow up, so is that letter clear enough on that point? You sent out a cover letter. Is that clear enough?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to reread it, or I'll take your feedback on that if we need to make that more explicit within the communication going out. I think the communication going out is pretty general, just saying we're looking at this new category in non-residential. We're specifically looking for the employee count of the businesses operating out of the commercial property, and once we've got that, we'll decide on mill rates come 2020 budget round in the spring.
So what is your question? Yeah, sorry. No, I'm just wondering whether you got an answer. I mean, if I own a property and I rent it out, is that a business?
Yeah, so I think the point of the legislation is to help your small businesses. So a lot of small businesses don't have the capital to own the property that they operate out of. Lease, rental is common. If we don't include those properties in it and rates go up, I'm assuming the landlord would pass on at least some of those increased property taxes onto the tenant. So if I think the legislation is broad enough that if you wanted to exclude those, like if, say, well, you have to own and operate out of the property to get this exemption, you could probably go there. But I think if the goal is to help the small businesses within the county, we want to include those properties in the envelope.
Still not my question. My question is more, what is a business? So if I own a piece of property, but I don't live there, and I rent it out to an individual who lives there for whatever reason, not a business, but an individual, is that a business?
So I've got a mobile home would be assessed as your residential and your land and improvements in the residential category. It's not going to fall into this non-residential bit. But are you thinking like I don't know, you've got a vacant plot of land and you've rented it to whoever for, yeah, I think you have to have a legitimate business operating, right? So it wouldn't just apply to vacant land that somebody might own and is And that could be a consideration that we look at writing into the bylaw as well. Vacant is excluded from being considered. Because we've got commercial vacant, commercial improved, we've got commercial in hamlets with improvements, and commercial in hamlets vacant. So if council wanted to exclude the vacant properties from being considered, that could be something to write into the bylaw, that it's only commercial with improvements, with a business operating out of it, that it applies to.
I don't like this in principle, that any business is going to maybe make decisions on how many employees it employs because of a tax break. I think a business should operate based on what it needs, not because there's a break in the taxes at some particular point. Or are they going to be put in a category of cheating on their information because they don't want to get pushed over that line? I don't like this one at all. I really don't think business should be directed by this type of an incentive to go either way, either up or down. And when it comes to the tenant, he always pays the tax. It's a pipe dream if you think that the landlord is going to carry any of that. It doesn't happen. I don't like this whole proposal personally.
Now, just to clarify though, even by breaking this up, we're not necessarily saying we have to give them separate mill rates, right? We're just saying that we're going to have different classifications of commercial, right? So they could all still pay the same mill rate if we so choose, but we're just going to have, we know now that we have a category of commercial with under 50 employees, we have commercial with over 50 employees. Is that
right? Yeah, so we can split it, we can get ready for the potential that you change the small business rate, but by no means does council have to apply a lower rate for it. I think it's to our advantage to at least identify those properties, and I'm kind of interested to see what kind of information comes back to us and the different situations we might see. So on the vacant, I can imagine maybe I'm a mechanic, I've got my shop on one parcel, so I've got improved, and then I've got a vacant lot where I stash all the broke down vehicles. I'm using it for my business, so even consideration of not including the vacant parcels in the deal might get muddy. But I think if you start down the road, what you pass today, we can always amend.
So there's two things that need to be done today then, Matt. The first is to authorize the two assessment classes, right? And then the other one is to classify, to send out so we can get the information. Okay. Any further questions? Anne-Marie.
Just correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we do first reading, it will give us the option to do it. Doesn't mean that we're going to do it, just the option is there. And after first reading, we will get the surveys back, and so that will give us some more information before we go on to second and third reading.
We wouldn't send the survey out until we had the completed bylaws. Yeah. So today, first reading, we engage the public, inform the public, wait for comment back if there's any comment back, and then I'll be here next council meeting for second and third reading. And at that point, we'll send the survey. And then get the results back by December 31st, and if we wanted to sit down and review the results of what came in and how much assessment is actually impacted and what we're really kind of looking at, we could continue the conversation and consider even amending the bylaw before our 2020 tax rate bylaw is put into place.
This doesn't do a public hearing. This is just like after.
Yeah, I don't think there's any requirement for a public hearing on this.
Kelly.
So if I was getting the letter, I would have questions around seasonal staff, and that's not addressed here. I would also have, it's not clear in the letter whether you're asking me if I have my home-based business on this land, like the office or the main operation on this land, or if it's a sub piece like you indicated with the storage of vehicles. I have questions that So when a business owner gets this, are they gonna answer to it?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. We had batted around the idea of pre-populating the form with the tax roll, legal land information, so it kind of takes some of that work out of it. So that's an option. So here's the properties you need to think about. What are the businesses that operate out of it, and what's your employee count at September 30th? So maybe we should include a definition of employee. So if you're just running half-time people, full-time equivalent kind of a thing. I think that's a good point.
Make it as clear as possible, and make it as easy as possible, because you want people to give you the information. And I mean, I suppose assessment and taxes confuse us all. I'm not sure if everybody will think, oh, this is a good thing for me to fill out, because small business means maybe there's a break for me. So, yeah, who knows? So, it's Kelly.
And then the alternative, I mean, this is information gathering, so the alternative is the way other municipalities gather this information is through a business licensing program. So that information could be shared as well. You know, we're not asking for a business license fee, but we do need this information. Something like that would make sense to me. Because we are one of few that don't collect a business license fee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and honestly, I would recommend that out of the gate, we keep it as straightforward as possible. You split the assessment class, we send the information out, hopefully clear enough that people understand what we're trying to gather. Once we've got the information back, we determine really what the impacts are. And there's a lot of moving pieces still, right? So you get the hearsay about the assessment year modifier is going to be dropped by 30%, but we haven't seen final assessment numbers either, right? So trying to get everything into place so that we've got the option to move, I think, is what's important right now. The details we can sort out moving forward, and I don't think we need to make it very complicated.
Matt, does Kevin have any idea when any of those assessment year modifiers and things like that will be sorted out after having been up in Edmonton? No way.
No, like we'll get our information February 28th, right? Is when he has to send his stuff, and then we'll get notified from the province what the damage is on linear.
As you said, there's a lot going on from the provincial level. Okay, decision time, folks. We have, Matt is recommending some actions. If there's no more questions, Wayne?
I make a motion on 1962-19, first reading.
Okay, that's the first one. For the purpose of authorizing council to divide assessment class 2 non-residential into subclasses. Be given first reading. And remember, with the first reading, at least we'll be able to get some feedback, hopefully, which might help us decide on second whether it gets that far. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And for the second recommended action, and this is the one to authorize us to classify, so we get the information on the small business properties, to send out the info. Tracy?
I'll make the motion for first reading.
Okay, Tracy will make the motion for first reading of that one. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Thanks, Matt. And then also you have 10.3, 10.4, investment policy.
Yeah, so this really just is a follow-through of that presentation this morning. I think James and Charit did an all right job unpacking what we're looking at for changes here. And like they said, it just really opens up the door for additional flexibility and removing some of those arbitrary limits there. So if you want me to go through it in any more detail, I'm happy to field questions.
Any questions for Matt? Clarence?
So basically, it's 75 to 100% in chartered banks, and any one bank could be now 25% of the total portfolio. That's a 2?
Yeah, right. And then extending the maturity period on our short-term portfolio from 1 year to 18 months.
Anne-Marie?
And I'll make that motion to approve updates to the investment policy.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, Matt. And that was a good presentation. So James and
Charit.
Charlie?
Charit.
Charit.
Think chart, and then put an E before the end. Charit.
Charit. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, they've been really really pretty good. I've been really impressed with those two. They share a lot of information. They're really invested in trying to get their clients educated on what they're doing. So I haven't ever felt like they're trying to pull the wool over my eyes, which is a good feeling. Right? I mean, you can't do anything really too exciting with our investment portfolio, but it's nice having that level of experience, and they're in it like every day, right? So they're looking for the opportunities, and they've done pretty good this year. But just remember that 2.1% or whatever they said going forward. Yeah, we've done really well this year because the central bank plunged their rates, and when they do that, the value of our portfolio goes up. So this is not a typical year.
No, it was good. I appreciated them coming to give us that information. Thanks, Matt. All right, moving through our agenda, I think it takes us to item 10.5, letter from a ratepayer, discontinued amalgamation talks between the County of Newell and the City of Brooks. And there is, the ratepayer letter is attached. And this was a letter that came to all of us with a, not really a request, possible reply to be appreciated. Kelly.
I'd like to make a motion, we accept it for information.
Okay. Any other conversation, comments? Brian?
Well, as much as I'd like to say that I agree with just accepting as information, this makes an accusation that our REIV is acting unilaterally without our support. If you didn't know the background of the way our council functions, that's the way this would be perceived, I believe. And I guess I just feel that the REIV has done nothing but support us and support what our decisions were by a majority. And in some way, I would like to address that. As much as I'd like to just accept it as information, that's the only part that doesn't necessarily sit well with me.
Thanks, Brian. Kelly?
I'd like to let you know as well, Molly, that I'm not in agreement. I totally don't want to spend any more time on this with this conversation, but that's how I felt. This was one person's opinion, so, or comments. I don't know if it's even an opinion, but don't know where it comes from, and I don't know where it's going to go, so I'd like to just drop it. With full support to you. I don't know how else to do it.
Thank you. Lionel, Anne-Marie?
Well, Kelly, I agree with you on this. And Brian, I appreciate your sentiment for our REIV, who's done an absolutely excellent job for us. And I'm very supportive of her. I also am in favor of this motion.
Anne-Marie?
I agree with all the speakers.
Any other comments? So then Ellen?
See, now, if I look at this, the writer of the letter didn't know how it all transpired, correct? Because there was not a motion made. So they don't know how it came about. So perhaps this is what I read into it, that although we know the truth, how it happened, they don't know because it was never put into a motion. So a person could enlighten this writer how it did come about.
I didn't hear the last comment, Ellen.
I said maybe whoever wrote this letter could be, does he deserve the right to know how it really happened? Because I read here that there was no discussion, no motion, no passage. They were looking through the minutes, and it is not in the minutes. And we know how it was decided, but they don't. So they could conclude that there was no discussion made, because they don't know that, because it's never mentioned in the minutes. See, when a decision is made, is it not true? When a decision is made in camera, one has to come out of camera with emotion on the table, and that's not what happened.
Wayne and Tracy?
But there wasn't a decision on amalgamation ever. That wasn't ever done. We made a decision, and I think there was a motion to look into it. There never was a motion, or even we have never discussed proceeding with amalgamation. We were looking into it. And this was told at all these meetings. Whether they want to believe us or not, that's what can we do? But this had been pointed out many times, and they wouldn't believe. Sorry. You can only tell them so many times. We will repeat it again. It was never about amalgamation. It was about looking into it, looking at the possibilities. Never amalgamation. And we can tell them every meeting, and there's people out there who won't believe us.
Tracy?
I guess I kind of look at it that this is kind of a moot point now. We're done discussing it. It was brought up as an idea to research it. We had pushback from our ratepayers. We said, okay, discussion over. It's not going to happen. So to me, this is a moot point getting in this discussion. I think we accept it for information and carry on.
Anybody else? Kevin?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's hundreds of letters that leave the office, from the office of the Reeve and the administrator, and they don't come through the minutes. So if that's something that the public and council would like, that all correspondence that goes out comes through the minutes, we can certainly make sure that those motions are there. But I think you may get tired of that real quick, because I agree. It's something that is done, and the ratepayers, this ratepayer is aware of that, and I think the letter's addressed to council, so he's wanting council to respond, yet he wants the Reeve to respond. The easiest thing to do is to say, yeah, it was discussed, and we're good with it, and thanks for raising your point. I don't know.
Hubie?
So you don't need a letter of reply then, at all? Just leave it, I think.
That's what the discussion is about.
We have a motion on the floor, and we could send a copy of that motion if we want to, or not.
Anybody else? There is a motion on the floor. Clarence? Oh, I thought you had a question. All right. There's a motion on the floor, and that motion is to accept this letter as information. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. And I think all ratepayers should know that we're always very approachable. My cell number is on my card. I give it out to everybody that needs it, wants it, as I think most of yours are too. So, all right, we will move on to, I think page 2 is done, so that takes us over to requests for functions of council, I believe. Nothing. Oh, Brian.
Just after the last meeting, I'm not exactly what date I got it for sure, but it was the end of September. I got a letter from the Alberta Energy Regulator, and they were having a workshop on October the 3rd, so I wasn't able to bring that to council prior to our last meeting, and it was addressed to me as chair of Foothills Little Bow. So, and they only accepted one person from each zone. So I talked to Brian Bruin thinking that would be his role, but he wasn't able to make it, and he asked if I would sit in his place. So I'm asking for that to be a function of council as a post request, I guess. And that was October 3rd.
Okay. Someone like to, Wayne will make that motion to approve Brian's meeting with the Alberta Energy Regulator, October 3rd. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Fortis proposed rate changes. Oh, sorry, Kelly.
Just going back, can we have a conversation about municipal elected officials course, the emergency management on October 23rd?
Sure.
I know the 3 on the present, sorry if I use the wrong term, will be going. I also have an interest. I come from that world, and I do have a few certificates in my background, so I too would like to attend.
Okay. Clarence?
I'd like to move that any councillor who wants to attend can attend.
Thank you.
Well, it's an exciting world, I'm sure, when you think of some of the emergency situations that councils have had to deal with in the last few years with flooding and fires. And I don't think any amount of training could really bring councillors up to speed with how tough it could be and how awful it would be. So all the help we can get, I think, is important. Anne-Marie?
Flip side, though, it's good that we get the training, but it's good that we have professionals in place who'll take care of it. And even though we have training, let's not take that leadership role at all.
Totally agree. Yeah. So Clarence made a motion that anybody should be able to attend on October 23rd if they're interested in that. Further discussion? All in favor? Excuse me, opposed? Motion is carried. Fortis. Information, I guess. Upcoming community events. I sent out the October 18th Business of the Year Awards. This isn't really, it is a community event, but I know this is more about getting our stuff out there, but if anyone is anyone attending in some other fashion? No? Okay, just wanted to try. Perfect. We have any in camera today? No? Well, I think, I'm not sure. Did we get it covered, no. Kelly? On the 15th? Did everybody get that? I didn't even think about that, Kelly. I am not. I have Brian going on my behalf because I am in Calgary that day. You know how sometimes you need to go to appointments with your husbands? Because they're deaf and don't listen or ask no questions? Yes. And I did not know who was invited, so I just have Brian covering for it. Well, Clarence says everyone was invited. So I'm sure the more the merrier, but Brian will be there. So anything else? Lane, what did we miss?
Well, didn't miss anything. Just in preparation for the organizational meeting, just a reminder, next meeting starts at 9 o'clock, organizational meeting. We want to know whether or not you want a new council picture taken of the whole group.
Absolutely, because I hate the last one.
Yeah.
That's the answer we're looking for.
I was looking a little rushed in that picture.
So come appropriately dressed in whatever attire you feel is appropriate.
All right. Thank you, Lane. All right. If there's nothing else, I'll adjourn the meeting at 2 o'clock.